Welcome to the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers and its monthly author showcase. I am your host, Peter Stockwell. Author Kat Richardson is visiting with us this month at the Bremerton Kitsap Access Television Studios. Kat and I met at Barnes & Noble when she was part of a panel of authors. We crossed paths at meetings of the Northwest chapter of Mystery Writers of America. Kat writes books which explore the paranormal, fantasy, and science fiction worlds of detective stories. Welcome to our broadcast of the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
You know, one person described you as the next superstar of paranormal fantasy fiction. Please, tell us about what it is you write.
Well, I always think that I write detective novels and other kinds of mystery formats that just happen to play in science fiction or fantasy settings, because that way I can say things that are a little more difficult to say and do things that I can't always do in the real world. Also, there was kind of that challenge to meet a new way of doing a detective story when private investigator novels were starting to kind of fall off in popularity.
So these detectives of yours, how do they get into the paranormal?
Oh, it depends. One of them died for a couple of minutes and came back, and then not only could she see the ghosts, they could see her. And
that's your Greywalker series.
That's the Greywalker series.
Yeah.
That was the original series, 9 books now. And then we went to bed with that, put it to bed back in 2014. Now there's a new series which is science fiction, the Gaddis Files, starting with Blood Orbit, which that one's really more police procedural, whereas the previous one was PI.
So what influences forge your thoughts into these worlds that you create for us?
Well, I've always loved reading mysteries. I started out with, children's mysteries like Encyclopedia Brown and
good old encyclopedia.
Yeah, The Great Brain and things like that when I was a kid. And then my parents read a lot of crime and mystery fiction, so they got me started in the Golden Age novels, Christie and all of those folks, and Ellery Queen and so on, because they thought those were safe for a kid. And then I snuck over into noir and started reading Chandler and Hammett and Kane and people like that on my own. And I continue to read a lot of all of that, just across the board, whatever's available, old stuff, new stuff, dark, cozy. If it's sitting around and it looks interesting, I will read it.
That's good. I think that's true with most of us as writers, that we are going to read what we write. Mm-hmm. It helps us to expand.
Yeah, and I've also enjoyed, fantasy and science fiction. There's always been a little bit of crossover in my mind because of pulp magazines that started in the 20s and 30s. A lot of our great writers in the mystery genre started there. And in science fiction and fantasy, as well as horror, a lot of those people came out of the same presses, edited by the same people like Anthony Boucher. And we've still got a little bit of that touch in genre. And I started reading Isaac Asimov when I was about 12, and he wrote mysteries as well as science fiction. And so I didn't think that there was anything wrong with mixing those things up.
Well, and the rest of us are very appreciative of that. So writers are told to write what they know. So is there any part of your life that makes it into your stories?
A little. I write about people I know and situations that I've been in. There was a kind of an odd incident when I was a child where one parent abducted me from the other, parental abduction stuff, not exciting, but along the way I found out a little bit about how the process goes for getting a child back and going through the legal process. And then my stepmother was a lawyer, and I spent a lot of time typing up legal briefs in her offices.
Yes, we do take those little nuggets and expand them into big stories.
Oh, always.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So have you enjoyed the challenge of becoming a better-known creator of books? How do you market?
Oh, well, luckily, I have some people to do it for me because I'm with a big publisher in New York. But these days, every writer, whether they're self-published or commercially published or a hybrid, they've got a little bit in each camp, and no matter what genre they're in, they're always marketing themselves. There's so much out there that if you don't tell people you're out there, no one else really will. And my experience has been that word of mouth is really what sells. So you talk, and then someone else who likes your stuff talks, and then a bookseller a bookseller or a bookstore then talks about you because they like you or your work. And that's really where you get a hold of people and get them interested in you, not, you know, the million ads that you might put out, or not, you know, yelling down the keyhole of Twitter, hey, buy my book. Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, we don't want to do that too much.
Well, you don't want to bore people to death with the constant pitch. You want them to be interested.
But we do write to the bookstores, we do write to the
absolutely.
entities that are going to have the possibility of putting our books in their stores.
Oh, yeah.
So that they know we're there.
Yeah,
And
you
then
let the bookstores know, you let librarians know.
Yeah.
Library is actually a great place to get people interested in you, because people think, I can't afford a book.
Right.
It's like, you can afford to go to the library, it's free, and if you ask them for a book, they'll get it.
I just finished a book about librarians and independent authors, which brought up that very point that much of the time an author becomes fairly well known because the publisher will put the books out for the library to buy, and the library buys them. And you know, we've got some 40,000 libraries across the country. It doesn't take long to get your books out there.
Oh, not at all. I try not to read reviews in the first few months after a book comes out, because that usually just depresses me. But I do always check to see if my book has gotten listed in WorldCat,
Yeah.
which is, you know, the library catalog throughout the United States, North America. And I'm always thrilled when I see, you know, the growing list of libraries that have my book or will get the book somewhere in their system. That always makes me feel very warm and fuzzy.
I'm waiting for the day when I go to the airport and somebody's reading one of my books.
I think we all wait for that day.
I know. It doesn't happen. Well, being a writer for me was a big change from my previous career as a teacher in middle schools. What was it that you did before pursuing this writing and becoming so nationally known?
Well, strangely enough, I have a degree in magazine editing. Talk about rarefied, yeah. Just before the bottom fell out of the journalism market, I worked for a trade publisher in LA, and we did what they call trade books, which are magazines for specific fields. So we wrote all of these specialist magazines, and I was just a backroom editor. We did a lot of basic editing, but it was fairly fast-paced because we had 62 titles to put out sometime every month. So we were busy, and we were constantly changing hats. So for 10 minutes a day, you'd be an expert in, say, orthopedic surgery, or honest to God, I'm not kidding, we actually did one on orthopedic surgery. We did fleet sales and maintenance. We did school buses. We did security. We did all kinds of stuff. And I was constantly, you know, changing my hat. Today I'm this editor, tomorrow I'm that editor. And, you know, took in a little bit of everything about being an information sponge.
And now you're putting it to work.
Yes, now I'm putting it to work.
Definitely putting it to work. Now, speaking of editing, since you are an editor, do you edit all of your own work, or do you make sure other eyes get to see it as well?
Oh, I have to have other eyes. I look right past the trees and see a forest. Like, look at this beautiful forest I have created. Whereas the editor comes in and says, well, that tree is dead, and that's not a tree at all.
Yeah.
I will miss it completely.
I look at the forest and see the tree, but I miss the forest.
When I'm looking at someone else's work, I'm always kind of missing the forest and looking at trees. Yeah. I also use beta readers who go through and look at it from different perspectives. I have men, I have women, I have people of different ages, I have people with different political outlooks or different specialties. If I'm looking for something technical, I'll get as many people as I can to read it and give me feedback that they are specialized in giving.
Yeah, I find that beta readers are very helpful because they are the audience that you're going to get when you get your book out there. So it's nice to have them and have them to give me feedback on what they have enjoyed about the book and really what they found to be a problem. And then, of course, we fix that.
We fix it. I always have this ongoing list of things to fix or things to do or things not to do or things to include or things to disinclude in the next book. And then off to the side, there's this ever-growing list of things I want to do that aren't going to fit in this series, but maybe in some other book.
Yes, yes. I write the synopses for many books in advance. So writing fiction, authors can become enveloped in their characters. You write stories of paranormal fantasy and futuristic detective fiction. Do you think your characters are real entities, you know, real beings? Do they talk to you?
I don't think of them as separate little voices in my head. They are characters, but they are rounded and complete human beings. They have backstories which sometimes never show up, but I know what goes on. I know where they're from. I know what they think. I know what they drink before they go to bed. I know whether they brush their teeth and floss like they ought to, or if they don't. You know, all those dumb little things, because it's all those little details that make a person on a page. Another writer I knew a few years ago, we had asked, a bunch of us were listening to a speech on developing a short synopsis, and said, do you include all the little bits? And she said, well, what little bits are we talking about? And someone said, well, you know, do you write the sex scenes? And she said, well, aren't they real people? Don't real people do that? And I thought, okay, maybe I don't necessarily need to put that right out in front of the reader. But if that's an appropriate thing for a character to do, then it's going to go in. Just like it's an appropriate thing for them to go to work or to not go to work, if that works for the story. It's an appropriate thing for them to have flaws. It's an appropriate thing to be married or divorced or whatever they're doing. And that way they become real people in your head, even though they're not actual talking heads.
Well, we hope they're not, but sometimes my characters tell me what to write, and that's okay.
Well, sometimes mine will refuse to do something.
Well, that's okay.
Well, I realize that often it's because I don't understand their motivation well enough.
Yeah.
And then I need to fix something else in the story, and then they'll go where I want. But until I've given them a reason to go there, they'll just sit there and kind of stare.
Well, that's good to know. So has this enhanced your skills as a writer to know all of these nuances of your characters? Even though, like, we human beings don't know everything about everybody when we meet them. We meet them in little pieces all the time. So you've put together the scenario of who the person is that you have as a character, and you bring it out little by little.
Exactly.
Just as we do as human beings.
Yeah, I never start out just writing absolutely everything. I don't have a birth certificate for them and so on. When I was a student, I would occasionally do all of this background stuff ahead of time. But as I got older, I stopped doing it and started relying on my instinct for it. And I do a little bit of what David Corbett describes in his book, The Art of Character, where I write scenes so that I can understand what the character thinks or what the character has been through or how the character will react to a certain situation. That might not ever make it into the final book, but it's there in what I call the scratch pile for me to go back to and say, I understand this character's motivation because I understand this important event in their history.
So you mentioned earlier that you have a large publisher. So who is your publisher? What obstacles did you overcome to get to the bookstores and the venues and such?
Well, the very first publisher for the Greywalker series was Ace Rock, which was a subdivision of Penguin. Mm-hmm. And at the time, they were the second largest publisher in the English language. They're now the largest publisher in the English language since they joined with Random House a few years ago. And I would say that to a certain degree it was luck. I managed to get in at the right time with the right kind of book with an agent who had an entree to that particular publisher because he was also the agent for a very big name in that subdivision. And so at the time, basically, it was a matter of, I know you're going to buy so-and-so's book, and here, look at this, it's very similar. And so I kind of slithered in, largely by luck, but I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
I would agree with that. I think it is, it's the old adage of, it took me 20 years to be an overnight sensation.
Absolutely.
You bet. So you have your books where?
Oh, they're luckily pretty much everywhere.
Everywhere?
Yeah, they're still available. The publisher is still putting out all the Greywalker books, so they're still going out to any bookstore or library that wants to order them. and the new books come out through Pyre, which is a subdivision of Prometheus Books, which, although they're a very small publisher, they're very aggressive. And so they do a lot of that distribution. So I don't have to fight for distribution, which I frankly wouldn't know how to do. I'm so happy that I have someone to do that for me, because if I was self-published, then I not only have to be a writer, an editor, and a publicist, I now have to be a distributor. And I think distribution is one of the trickiest things that we face as writers.
Right, it is.
Getting that book into a reader's hand, not just getting them to know it exists, but putting it someplace where they can get a hold of it, not just an Amazon download.
I did have a a distributing company that closed its doors a few years ago, and they sent all my books back to me. So they are now in my warehouse called my garage.
Ah,
so
mein garage.
I distribute. Actually, it's only one title that's left in there, and it's the title that I will live with until I sell all those books. But
Are you thinking of retitling when you do finally get rid of it?
well, it's a possibility, but the title is a good one, so we'll just leave it as it is.
Well, titles are always such a tricky thing.
Yeah.
With the Grey Walker series, every book had a one-word title, and it's hard to come up with a intriguing one-word title every single time. And with the new publisher, my agent and I sent the book out under one title, and they came back after buying it and said, we don't really like this title very much. We would like something that sounds more science fiction-y. And we went back and forth for 2 months before we all agreed on a title that we thought was science fiction-y, but also very, detective fiction, and still attracted the audience we wanted.
And the publisher is doing all your covers and such.
Yes.
And do you fight for your covers?
I fight as much as I can. Whenever the more people who are involved, the more you're negotiating.
Yeah.
And I have this theory that I operate on all the time called the diva card. You earn the chance to put a diva card down and say, nope, that's it. It shall be my way or the highway.
Yeah.
But you don't do it very often. You do it only for something that you think is really worth the chance that someone will say, okay, then leave. And so I hoard those. But every once in a while I do, in fact, slap my diva card down and say, no, it shall be my way or I shall take my book and go home. And it's worked the couple of times that I've done it. But as I said, I wait until I think I really have to have that.
That's something we have to be very careful about.
Very.
Because basically they're taking our material and using them, but they have all the cards except for those couple of divas.
Yeah. But, you work with someone and they respect you and they respect what you give them, you hope. If you're not working with a company that is offering you some respect as well as money, you probably don't want to be there.
Right. I would agree. Your books would make a great series on television or in theaters as movies. Do you have any prospects for that happening?
Oh, they've come and gone several times. The Grey Walker series has been optioned several times, and then for various reasons dropped out of option. Right now, there is a document doing the rounds for the new book with the Hollywood agent. It's a sub-agent of the sub-agent. Everybody takes a little bite of your pie until all you get left is the little hard crust at the edge. But they do go out periodically, and someone always says, this is a great idea. I don't remember who told me, but someone said 1% of all books that get published get optioned, and 1% of those actually turn into something.
That's not very many.
It is not very many.
So
but I figure...
we're not going to play the Martian here.
No. I always figure if it goes, that's terrific, and if it doesn't, it's no great loss.
If a book club or another organization wanted to invite you to speak, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, I do have a website, and I usually manage that stuff myself because I'm a sort of mid-list editor, writer. Well, a mid-list editor upon occasion, too. So people can get a hold of me at the primary website, which is catrichardson.com. They can also get a hold of me through websites for the other series, but that's the easy one.
Okay. And by the way, we've just posted that above your head. So we'll make sure that that gets out. We'll put it in the contact list at the end of the
Oh,
credits,
thank you.
and any other pieces of information for contact, phone numbers or emails
Mm-hmm.
or anything will be in there as well. So what's coming up next? I know Blood Orbit just
Yeah.
came out not too long
Yeah,
ago.
that just came out at the beginning of May. That's the first in the science fiction police procedural, and it really is very much a procedural. The science fiction setting and details are there to enable me to tell the story that I really wanted to tell, more than to be, look, we're going to go to science fiction land. Because I'm kind of a science nerd in my own little limited way, and I always want to put in the fun stuff. But sometimes it's not appropriate, and so it doesn't get in. I only put in what I really need to tell the story I want. And right now we're negotiating for a second book in the series, so with luck there will be a book 2.
With luck. So that's what so your writing right now is?
Right now I'm working on that because in order to stay in publication schedule, it would have to be in my editor's hands no later than mid-September to be out next May. You're always kind of doing that with the publication schedule, which I know you know.
Oh, yeah.
If you want something to hit at a certain time, you have to look at that closing date and then work backward and say, this is the very last date that I can get this part of that job done. And so even though they haven't yet bought it, I know what date we have to hit in order to stay on schedule. So I'm assuming that it will go, and if it doesn't, I've got a couple of other things on the back burner, and we'll just shift gears and do that instead.
Sounds all right. Keeps you busy.
Very much.
Well, we writers all begin with that first word and that first sentence, and we construct, and we continue to construct until we have a manuscript. Do you have any advice for any of those writers out there in this world who are just beginning? I meet them all the time. I give them what I can, but you're a nationally known author. What advice do you have to someone who's just beginning their writing career, so to speak?
Don't give in too early. A lot of people get discouraged. They think if I don't get a major publishing contract or I don't finish this particular manuscript to my own satisfaction by a certain date, then it's all over and I might as well just quit. But the fact is, it isn't that easy. And yet it is just that easy. You just keep on going. You really do. I almost gave up on this book, on Blood Orbit. We had sent it around, and it had been shopping for quite a long time. It was literally rejected by every major imprint in the business, and a whole bunch of minor imprints and second-tier imprints. And I had just had the conversation, we're done, with my agent, and a week later we got an offer from the very last people we had ever expected to hear from. And it came in at the very last minute in December, when we had...
And they got it together in plenty of time to get it out the 1st of May.
Well, it was...
I mean,
the
there are all
yeah.
a lot of steps that are in
Yeah,
there.
it was...
We don't need to bore those beginning
yeah.
writers with the...
Yeah, you do. You just have to persevere. And you really, really have to love the writing part, because this all pays too badly to hate.
Yeah. Well, as a self-published author myself with my own publishing company, I realize those steps that you have to go through, and you do have, that schedule has to be somewhat kept. So those of you who are out there writing, keep at it, don't give up. You know, as a former retired teacher, I kept saying, whenever I see students, I keep saying to them, you never give up. And that's true. I mean, we who want to write don't give up.
No.
Our book may not go anywhere, a manuscript may sit for a while. We're going to continue to write that next manuscript.
Oh, my father was an English teacher. And so writing was a fairly easy thing for me. He was, you know, coached me from the time I was a little kid to write better. Not because he thought I should be a writer, but because communication was important to him and books. So, you know, we wrote. And if you love writing, you keep on doing it even if you don't get published.
Well, I think that's great. Thank you, Kat, for sharing all you do in this literary world and coming out to record this show. We share this common interest in writing, and I invite you to become part of our Kitsap literary artists and writers. I know you don't live in this area, but still we have people from all over that are are interested in our group and what we do. And as such, as we continue to work together, both in the Mystery Writers Association and with Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers, and it may come at a point where we would like you to host a show.
Oh, well, this has been a lot of fun, and I would love to do more with you guys, so thank you.
We basically are not a critique group. We are a group about marketing. And so your expertise would be wonderfully appreciated and greatly loved. We enjoy what we do, and as such, I would like to thank all of our viewers for tuning in to the Bremerton Kitsap Access Television and viewing this Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers production. I also wish to thank the BCAT staff on the cameras and in the director's chair. Our broadcasts are scheduled for Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. on Wave Cable Channel 3 and Comcast Channel 12. You can also view a live stream on the BCAT website at bkat.org at 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Keep in touch with our Facebook pages, our author web pages, to discover where you can meet local authors and artists. And I hope everyone has a pleasant evening and a productive and fascinating week. Until next Saturday, I am Peter Stockwell with Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. Good night.
Yay.